I wouldn't open up and start talking about all your business problems and then say, first thing I would say, let's go to a meeting. I would start asking you questions to validate your position, your beliefs, your process, your methodology, your KPIs. And then once I had all that, I would ask for a meeting. So what you do offline are the same things that you would do online. I want to welcome you to my sales podcast, where we have one focus and one focus only. That is helping you, the sales community, and sales leaders create more conversations with more qualified buyers, ultimately leading to improving your sales productivity and closing more deals. Each show, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, and connect with more buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., and you're now listening to the Selling with Social Sales Podcast.
Hey everyone, this is not Mario Martinez Jr. This is Bernie Borges, CMO and co-founder of Vengreso. And hey, I am doing a takeover today on the Selling with Social podcast. And guess who my guest is? Just guess. It is Mario Martinez Jr. Mario, welcome to your own podcast.
That's a good one. Welcome to my own podcast. That's exactly right. Bernie, I'm excited to be here as your guest on my podcast. Yeah, I guess that's right.
Yeah, I know it takes a little getting used to. That's okay. That's okay. I can relate. So, hey, we are here to talk about something that actually just came up in a webinar that we just recently delivered. We had 3 rockstar CMOs on this webinar. The title of the webinar is Entering into the Mind of the Marketing Executive Buyer. And in the course of these 3 panelists, these 3 marketing executives, we were talking with them about how do you get into their office? How do you get on their radar? How do you sell to them? How do you develop trust and relationships with them? And they all had a common theme, and it kind of brought us to this whole topic of personalization. And then you brought up the Vengreso PVC methodology. So that's what we're going to discuss on this episode, your episode, Mario, of this podcast, Selling with Social. So let's start, Mario, with what is the PVC methodology?
Okay, so this is actually interesting because, we introduced this concept, the PVC methodology, as you know, in our Selling with LinkedIn and Selling with LinkedIn Sales Navigator course, both for individuals and for teams. And we came to market with this. As many of our listeners know, we invested, and we got the number, 3,932 hours. That's 3,932 hours, as you know, Bernie, because you were part of it, in investing in our training program for those that are wanting to understand how to sell with LinkedIn. And one of the methodologies that we've trademarked is what we call our PVC methodology. And this PVC methodology, think of PVC as in like the piping, Bernie?
Yeah, the building material. Yeah.
Building material, exactly. And the PVC method basically is an acronym. P stands for personalize.
Okay.
V stands for value. And C stands for call to action.
Okay. So how does the sales professional implement the PVC methodology, and where?
Good question. Now, I think it's important for our listeners to know on this PVC methodology or method, why did this come up and is being placed onto a podcast? And as when we introduced this, we have received hundreds of messages from LinkedIn through Contact Us on, oh my God, the PVC method makes so much sense. Like, yes, you're right. So where does it come from? What was your question? Where does it come from?
I think what we're doing is we're addressing the why. I jumped ahead. I asked, how does a salesperson use it? But I think you're going down exactly the right channel. And that is, why does it even exist? Why is it important for salespeople to even embrace the PVC methodology?
I probably couldn't say it any better than the CMOs that we had on this recent podcast.
Right.
And we asked them a question of, how do we penetrate your office, right? It was like entering the mind of the executive marketing buyer. Inquiring minds wanted to know, how do I get into your office? And there was a couple of things that they mentioned. First off, they mentioned the referral. The referral was huge. Getting in my office, get referred, right? All right. The next one was, it's okay to reach out to me. All 3 CMOs said, don't call me. What they also said is when you do reach out to me on a omni-channel approach to prospecting, you should use social, you should use email, you should use video, you should use, one of them even said text messaging, right? They said, you better make sure that you personalize the message to me and that you bring value. And it was like, oh, moment, right? It was like the hallelujah moment, right?
Like a what? Like a what?
Oh! It was that hallelujah moment that when they said all these things and they said, I want personalization, you better bring value, and then you can ask for, whatever it is that you might be looking for. And I said to them, I said, oh, you're referring to our PVC method. And the panelist said, well, what's the PVC method? Personalization, give value, leverage a call to action or include a call to action, right? CTA. So when we think about this PVC method, the P is personalized. So you have 2 things that you can do when personalizing a message. This is not just a LinkedIn InMail. This is not just an email. We're talking about anytime that you reach out to a buyer, you should practice the PVC. Whether it's a connection request, whether it's a cold prospecting email, whether you're sending a video message, whether you are sending an in-mail, any type of outreach, you should implement the PVC. Now, what does personalize mean? First off, you have personalize to them, to the individual. And the second component is you have personalized to the buyer. Now, you might be wondering, what's the difference?
A really good example was given by one of the marketing executives where he used the example that someone actually combined the 2 into one message. So you want to kind of speak to that?
Yeah. So personalizing it to them was specifically in this case, they said, hey, I saw that you just acquired blah, 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 blah. And interestingly enough, probably one of the challenges that you'll be dealing with is how to integrate this when you bring these 2 worlds together, these 2 companies together.
Mm-hmm.
So for him, it was you clearly used news and information to personalize it to an event that took place. And then you immediately went into talking about the struggles that I, as a CMO, am going to be facing as a result of this merger and acquisition. That was event-based messaging, right? It's like there was something that was going to happen, and now there was something that was going to take place. And so the sales rep artfully utilized that news event to be able to acknowledge that they did their research and furthermore follow up with respects to you might be dealing with these types of challenges. And
yeah, but let me just I want to highlight one thing, Mario, because he actually mentioned this. He said that personalization was to my persona, like who I am as a marketing executive, and it was highly relevant and it was highly personalized that he just explained. And then there was another level of personalization in that outreach.
Go ahead.
This marketing executive had posted an article that he had written. And in this article, the CMO wrote an article about an experience that he had, an encounter that he had with a woman that he observed at Starbucks who was very stressed out and nervous. And so he approached her and asked her if she was okay. And it turned out she was very nervous about going for a job interview. So he ended up coaching her for some period of time, helping her. And she was very appreciative of that. And he wrote this article just to point out that, like, we're all busy, but we need to be human and we need to help out fellow human beings in a moment of recognizing that. And the individual who personalized the message to him personalized it both at his persona. Like you said, they went through an acquisition. You're probably having the struggle. Here's how we can help you. And oh, by the way, I really appreciated that article you wrote, and here's why. And he appealed to that aspect of the CMO at the human level. And that was huge.
Yeah, and he actually correlated the emotional connection that the CMO felt in helping somebody to an experience that he had as well. And so to your point, it humanized the salesperson. It wasn't just a business. Now he actually looked at him as a human, right? Like, so back to our point on personalization, there's two ways that you can personalize messages. Number one, to the buyer persona. We gave an example of that. And number two, to the individual. I'll give you another example of how that might take place. Day before yesterday, I received an email from somebody who was wanting to pitch individuals to sponsor our podcast. In his opening sentence, he said, Mario, I absolutely loved your podcast with Dave Elkington, CEO of Inside Sales. I didn't realize that by using 3 to 4 channels and the omnichannel approach could increase my opportunity for win by 400%. Now, it was clear that he listened to the podcast because that wasn't until like 30 minutes into a 45-minute long podcast. So it was clear he heard the podcast. And then he further went on to explain, like, now that he knew that information, now he was better equipped with being able to blah, 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 blah. So as soon as he did that, I knew that he had listened to this podcast, and now I had an active, loyal follower or person that I was going to engage with. And even though his ask was not something that I could do, I still responded back because now he emotionally connected to me. So that's that personalization to the individual. But sometimes, Bernie, our sales reps can't personalize to the individual because guess what? There are some executives who put nothing out there on social that you can even, correlate to. That's when the default was, back in the example we gave earlier, was personalized to the buyer persona. And in this case, the rep used an event and what challenges, in this case, the CMO would be facing as a result of the merger and acquisition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And, another way to do some of that personalization, to your point, sometimes the person that you're calling on or want to reach doesn't offer any content, but there may be other content available on the public domain. There may be a big conference in the industry in reference, the presence that they had at that event, and maybe do a little homework on maybe what products were announced or, big deals were announced or whatever, so that they can at least deliver some kind of personalization, not just to the persona, but also about what's going on at the company and something very recent. And that's this example about exhibiting at an event and unveiling a new product launch, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of reps and a lot of leaders don't understand the importance. And in fact, I think we made a funny way. One of the funnies that we made was, sending that cadence emails. So it's like, oh, your cat must have died, or, oh, my cat died. Are you still alive? Like those types of messages to these CMOs, they don't work, right? And it's canned messaging. And our CMO panelists specifically brought out that they're expecting sales leaders to drive their sales teams and sales reps to humanize the engagement experience, to do the research, to connect with them. They also reference that, no matter what level of personalization, if there wasn't a buying need at that particular time, if that was not the issue, then it really wasn't going to be something they were going to be focused on, right? And so right. That, of course, is still going to exist inside of the world of sales, no matter how personalized you might get. And I gave you the example of the person who reached out to me, who listened to the podcast. No matter how personalized it was still a no-go for me because that's not something that we could have dealt with.
But one of the CMOs made the comment that if the personalization is done well in a relevant way, even if the timing isn't right, he made the point of saying, you got my attention. And when the timing does come up for me that I need your solution, I'm probably going to remember you. And if you do a good job of staying on my radar in a way that isn't pushy, in a way that's relevant, and just continues to deliver value, which we haven't gotten to yet, we're getting there just in a moment, then I'm going to remember you and I'm going to reach out to you when the timing is right.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is probably a great segue to what's the V in PVC and the value.
Yeah. Okay, so how do salespeople deliver value using the PVC approach?
So value, I think, is somewhat of a cliche term. We see this all the time. Sales influencers are saying it. You got to give value. You got to give value. You got to give value. Buyers are saying, you got to give value. You got to give value. You got to give value. Right? We hear this all the time. It is so cliche because nobody ever says, what is the value? Right? And oftentimes salespeople are like, well, I think I'm bringing value, but they're not really sure. And so let's like net this out. Giving value is really addressing pain. That's what giving value is all about. Again, going back to the panelists that we had, the fireside chat that we just recently hosted with 3 leading CMOs, they talked about that this value, there's got to be a need that they're trying to solve for, but the value must address a specific pain, but you need to be speaking the language of, in this case, it was the CMO. And specifically, one of the CMOs said, look, as the CMO of a company that's owned by a private equity firm, I'm having board meetings, and in those board meetings, they're asking me about how to reduce churn. They're asking me about top line revenue growth. They're asking me about our costs and how to address those types of things. So these are the things that I'm focused on. And if you start bringing value to address those specific problems with technology or solutions that might help, I'm going to listen. In addition, some of them also talked about, how you can help bring value is help me understand what is happening in the market out there with my competition. And once you understand those things, now come to me and tell me how you're going to help me beat my competition in these particular areas that are pertinent and important to me as in this case, a CMO. Now, how do you give the value is what we teach inside of our Selling with LinkedIn program and Selling with LinkedIn Sales Navigator program. And that is by using content to address the specific pains, right? And that content, we call it content for sales enablement. That's what we call it here at Vengreso. We help marketing organizations and sales leaders to do an entire content strategy assessment to map content to the awareness, consideration, and purchasing phase of the buyer's journey, and to make sure that they've got content that is addressing the specific types of pains that your company can solve. And that's super important. So how do you give value? You give value by speaking the language of the buyer that you're selling to, understanding the pain that they are dealing with and they're trying to address, and utilize content to help them solve that particular problem. Now, content could be, as we've talked about, Bernie, it could be video, it could be a webinar, it could be a white paper, it could be an ebook, it could be a blog article, right? So that's what we need to do. And when we're engaging with value is acknowledge that we understand the pain and bring in that piece of content that reinforces, quite frankly, our value proposition.
Yeah, so in the context of the comment that he made, where he said, you've got to speak my language, he also made the point, he said, ask me about the metrics that I am measured by. And the point that he was getting at is that is not only personalizing it, but it's also adding value, because if someone asks me about those KPIs, what are the KPIs that I'm measured by? Not only can that supplier potentially help me, but they can help me within my career, right? Because as a CMO, I'm measured, I've got a job, I've got to perform, and I've got to deliver on these metrics. So when a supplier knows what those metrics are that are important to me, to my job performance, to the board that I'm reporting to, that is both personalization, because it's unique to me, and it's adding value. And then the content, he made the point of saying that content for content's sake can be meaningless, but content that can deliver on that promise of adding value to help me understand how I can deliver on those KPIs, that's content that he's going to read or consume.
Absolutely. And of course, the value generally is going to be in the context of the value proposition that your company solves, right? Or your company brings to the table. Now, there are occasions where value might be, and I'll give you an example, a rep reached out to a buyer, wasn't the right timing, but then they found out that this buyer was super into astronomy. Like they were an astronomy buff, they were an astronomy lover. And so the rep began actually engaging with content that was about real odd things related to astronomy. And so the buyer quickly realized that that was very highly personalized material, but what she, in this case, was sending was content that was not in the context of the value proposition of the company, but it was what was valuable to the buyer in this case.
Individual, the person, the human being.
Yes, I'm sorry. I keep saying buyer. To the individual. You're right. That's the right term. To the individual. So just like our panelists talked about on the entering into the mind of the executive marketing buyer, if they don't have a need, then there may not be an opportunity to sell something. But it doesn't mean that you can't remain top of mind by understanding, in your case, what are the KPIs that they're being measured by? And how do you find content that helps solve other problems that will keep you top of mind? Or in this case, the astronomy person who is super, super, super into the stars. And this rep started finding content. By the third piece of content that she sent that said, hey, I thought of you, right? I thought of you. The buyer said, you know what? You are amazing. I don't know exactly how you're going to solve my problem, but let's meet now so I can start figuring out how you can help solve my problem, right? And it turned into a discussion.
So, Mario, what we're talking about here, which is really the subject of a whole another podcast, so I'm only going to mention it and then you can decide, to cover it some other time. We're talking about emotional intelligence here. That's what we're really talking about. Having the cognizance of using emotional intelligence as you're engaging with the people you want to sell to. But you know what? I'm hosting this episode and I am watching our time, Mario. So I think it's time we get to the C in PVC. So first tee up, what is the C in PVC?
So that C actually stands for CTA, call to action, right? So leveraging a call to action or including a call to action. So when you send off a connection request, an email, a video message, an in-mail, when you're leveraging it for social selling on LinkedIn, you've got to include a CTA. Now, most sales organizations make the mistake in thinking that the CTA has to be, can I ask for 30 minutes of your time? And that is potentially a fatal error mistake. What you might want to consider in the CTA is how to create engagement with your outreach. Whether it's on email, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a video message, whether it's a text, whether it's an in-mail on LinkedIn, how do you create engagement? What do I mean by that? Well, a couple things on a CTA. A CTA could be something as simple as you ask a question to solicit a response. Example, if I'm selling to you, Bernie, as a CMO, most CMOs that we deal with or are communicating with or work with struggle with these two common problems: generating more leads for their sales organization. Are you struggling with this problem? That is a very simplistic call to action, because what you're doing is you're asking a question to solicit a response. If they say yes, you know that you have potentially a live problem that you could potentially address. If they say no, no doesn't mean no forever. It just means no, not right now. And now you can easily move beyond and not have to try to prospect and get a meeting that it doesn't end up going anywhere. So a CTA could be ask a question to solicit a response. It could also be ask for their opinion. And we've done this before. And let me give you an example. We had a customer who we came to them and we said, have you ever thought about doing LinkedIn profile makeovers for your entire team, for all 100 salespeople, in order to be able to be keyword optimized, found, and provide the right type of messaging so that when your sellers are engaging through social, your buyers understand who and how you help and what business problem you solve? In this case, the CMO said, don't need it, don't have a problem, thanks so much, not really a priority for us. Our response was, we wanted to ask their opinion. No problem, recognize that. I pulled a couple of LinkedIn profiles of your sales reps. And the first one has a skull and crossbones sitting at the top of their LinkedIn profile.
You mean on their banner?
On their banner, on the LinkedIn banner.
Okay.
The question was, is this what you want representing your company's brand? Oh, by the way, the rep had been there for 2 years. Another one that we sent over was one of your reps actually used to work for Google selling search engine optimization services, had been with the company for a little over a year, and sentence 1, paragraph 1 of the summary, it said, top search engine optimization expert, when the company was actually selling a totally different solution for technology and software that didn't even apply. So the question is wait, are you selling technology it was artificial intelligence technology? Are you selling this to solve this problem, or is your rep selling search engine optimization? And so that was the question of you said you don't need help. No problem. I acknowledge that you don't need help, but I noticed these two challenges that we saw, and we did the research and we provided them to them. And then we furthermore did the research and we said, we pulled the last 25 people. And when we did that, we noticed that at least 80% of them actually had no messaging whatsoever to their buyers. Now, let me ask you a question, Mr. Customer. Do you believe that what LinkedIn stated in the end of 2018, that 62% of your buyers look back at your LinkedIn profile when you engage with them? Of course, in this particular case, they had to say, OMG. I did not realize that was a problem. So you did the research, and what we did was we asked a question to solicit their opinion.
Okay, so I want to ask you two final questions because I'm watching our time. The first one is, let's wrap up PVC. So if you were in an elevator and it was a 1-minute elevator ride, and there was an executive in that elevator with you, and he or she said to you, Mario, I heard you talking something about PVC. Is that building material or what is that? How would you explain it in that 1-minute elevator ride?
It's the standard rule and methodology that you use to create outreach with any particular buyer on any medium, whether it's through phone, through email, through social selling on LinkedIn, through Twitter, through an in-mail, through a video, through a text, through a connection request message on LinkedIn, any of those mediums, it's the standard methodology that your rep should use. P, personalize to either the individual or the buyer persona. V, give value. That's usually dealing with helping to solve a particular pain. And C, drive to a call to action or include a call to action. And it may not mean ask for a meeting. While that is a CTA, that's a call to action to ask for a meeting, it might not mean that. It might simply mean that you're trying to drive engagement with that particular buyer. And a great example of that, Bernie, if I met you at a live conference and I was targeting you, I wouldn't open up and start talking about all your business problems and then say, first thing I would say, let's go to a meeting. I would start asking you questions to validate your position, your beliefs, your process, your methodology, your KPIs. And then once I had all that, I would ask for a meeting. So what you do offline are the same things that you would do online. And that's what we teach in our Selling with LinkedIn and Selling with LinkedIn Sales Navigator.
Perfect. Okay, one final question, Mario. This is going to be a test for the listener to validate that they've listened all the way to the end of this episode. Okay, here we go. Give me something juicy that is not on your LinkedIn or any of your social profiles. And I mean something juicy.
Well, the juicy stories, I can't tell in less than a minute. But I do have a most embarrassing moment story that I actually would publicly tell, but it's going to take longer than a minute. And it has to do with a little bit of a gas bubble.
I think we'll end it there. In fact, I'll give you the safe way out, and that is your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
My all-time favorite movie, believe it or not, is The Goonies. The Goonies. When we were growing up as kids, I wanted to be a Goonie, and still to this day, I'm inspired by The Goonies. They had a thought, they had a vision, they had a focus, and they went for it. And that's exactly what I feel like we do here every single day with Vengreso. We had a thought, we had a vision, and we're going for it.
All right. Well, you heard it here on this episode of Selling with Social. You now know a little bit about the most embarrassing moment in Mario Martinez Jr.'s life and his favorite movie, The Goonies. So, hey, I am Bernie Borges. I hijacked today's episode. We should mention, Mario, that I also host a podcast, the Vengreso podcast, called the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Check that out if you're a marketer or you know a marketer, point them that way. So, Mario, I'm going to just sign off here and now. You got any closing thoughts?
PVC it. Always PVC it.
PVC all the way, baby.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Bernie. Hey, thanks for listening to the Selling with Social Sales podcast. Did you enjoy that show? If so, would you do me a huge favor and give the Selling with Social podcast a rating and review on iTunes? That would be super awesome. Also, If you want to easily find our show, just go to Vengreso.com. That's Vengreso.com and click on podcast. From there, you'll find the Selling with Social podcast. Thanks for listening in. And until the next show, be awesome. Mario Martinez Jr.